and specifically on how we reduce violent crime by reducing the likelihood of individuals sort of fighting back after an incident. So, we're going to talk about this in some real detail. And so these are situations where perhaps a family member has been involved in a violent crime and there's a need or a desire for revenge, and how we interrupt that process. That's what this comes from. I also want to let folks know this is part of the I think it's called the Safe Cities community. We can put that in the chat box. The collaboration between about 28 cities that are involved in this through the John Jay School of Criminal Justice. So that's where this comes from. In previous incarnations, it was known as Operation Ceasefire way back, I think in the 90s, but there have been a lot of changes since then, but a lot of people, sometimes you'll still hear that name. And so it's known, again, under a couple of different sort of acronyms, but it's all a very similar construct. And again, it's now academically well researched and advised in terms of what comes from the John Jay School to different cities in terms of how we put this together. So a little bit of background on this. Basically, we heard about this program, myself and the DA's office, and actually the Chamber of Commerce here in Albuquerque, when I first came in to this position. And I remember I was actually a little bit skeptical at first. And they kept saying, you got to check this out. This is going to be great for our city. This is going to help with violent crime. And what I did do was call some other mayors. And I called around to several mayors who were involved in the program, and they all said it's one of the best things they've done to deal with violent crime. And so in literally, they all mentioned, to do it through, again, the John Jay School and so forth. And so we decided to do that. So our office, APD, as well as the DA's office and the Chamber of Commerce and some others, had several visits to visit other cities on how to set this up. And it also included some seminars and training out at the John Jay School. And I personally participated in this along with Chief Medina back right before COVID hit. So it was almost a year and a half or so ago when we were out there. And that's when we committed, Chief Medina, myself, and Sarita Nair, our CAO, and we said, you know what, this is right for our city. We must do this as soon as we can. And then we proceeded to build a team to make this happen. And you're going to hear a little bit about them. So I'll let them speak to their own experiences with this, but we had to, as an administration, create this program. So it is new, and we staffed it with a commander and his department that works on this. So you're going to meet Commander Luke Langwood, and we also staffed it on the civilian side with Jerry Bachicha and her team, and Teresa and Angel. And so you'll hear from them as well today. So what this program does, it's very personal, it's very powerful, and I think it's also very eye-opening. And basically, it starts at first by understanding that a lot of the violent crime in Albuquerque is driven by a very small number of people. And the John Jay School helps us use data and work on this with these other partners that I mentioned. And you essentially identify or so a small group, let's say a couple of hundred, who are at high likelihood to commit a violent act in the future. And then we engage them, but we engage them in a very interesting way. We offer them sort of a carrot and a stick. We let them know that APD is watching them, that they will be held accountable and be brought to justice if there is a violent act, because we're aware of them and we're aware of what they've been up to. The other side of the equation is we offer help. Often it's things like housing. It could be little things like even diapers for their children, or trying to get a job, trying to get training at CNM, because we want to pull them out of that cycle that often is associated too with group or gang affiliations. So we're trying to pull them again out of that cycle. And this is what has shown significant drops in violent crime over the last 10 years throughout the country. And again, you can reference all the material at the John Jay School for Criminal Justice to see the data on this. Now, to date, we have made nearly 140 custom notifications, and these are conversations that we have with individuals that meet the criteria that I mentioned, and we have this conversation with them, literally at their house, typically in their front yard. And we've had about, like I said, 140 of these, and then we again pair them with services, but also that message of accountability. And sometimes this can even take place in hospital rooms. They might have been a victim of a crime. And so we want to get to them before they try and retaliate. And some of this work is also somewhat confidential and personal. So I want to just preface some of the questions that, these individuals do have certain things that have to remain confidential and so forth. So just letting you know why sometimes we have to be a little bit vague with respect to this. But I want to be very specific about a part of this program. The studies have all shown that it actually is most powerful to have the support providers and APD, and oddly to me, even the mayor, personally there in these conversations. So I have spent a significant amount of time in these conversations in driveways with folks with strong criminal records, trying to convince them to leave that life of criminal behavior. And what you learn is these individuals are suffering from numerous challenges that go back 10, 20 years in their own lives. It could have been domestic, even child abuse situations from when they were growing up here that were not handled appropriately at the time by our community. And it could also be situations around children. Just last week when I was out with some of these conversations, this individual was wanting to end a life of criminal activity because he had a daughter and he just wanted to get custody. So he's focused on getting a job to set up literally a room where his daughter can come stay with him. And that was his motivating factor. And we can help him in that process. And then he can stay out of the kind of activity that he was doing before. So everyone has a unique story. And I think we see this in any situation, but especially in this situation. And that's why we call it a custom notification, because our response is customized to the individual's situation. And again, it's just based on the data. It's not like I thought it was a good idea, but apparently it is meaningful for them to even have the person at the top of the city there. So that's why I'm on this call with the team that I now see as we meet with these individuals all across our town every few months or so. So they're going to tell you more about it, and then we will be able to take some of your questions. So I think with that, I want to hand it over to our chief of police, who also has been personally involved in this work, and of course is the person making it all happen from the top. Chief Harold Medina. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. We launched the VIP program in April of 2020, and to this point, we've had 149 notifications. If you haven't followed the program, our VIP program is focused on drivers of crime and those individuals who are most likely to commit a violent act. And we engage these individuals in hopes of giving them the resources to kind of end that cycle of violence that they're involved in. A majority of these individuals are very young. And as the mayor said, many simply just need the right resources and they need an assistance to get their life on the right track. We've provided them with resources like shelter services, rental assistance, job training, mental health assistance, food boxes, etc. But I think the most important thing is that number one, as I'm out there and I visited with families, you really see how the families care about their loved ones, because a lot of these individuals live with family members, especially older parents. And the parents are really there as a support network, and they're very happy to see that some of the highest ranks from city government are there. And many times I hear them say, I just can't believe the chief of police, the mayor, they're here at our house trying to help my loved one get out of this cycle of violence. We're there to intervene to make sure that this cycle ends, like I stated earlier. And we know that the program is already making a positive change. Of the 149 individuals that we've contacted, only 3% have reoffended, and none of those offenses has involved the firearms. So there's a lot of great success that we're seeing in terms of the contact we're making and the individuals not reoffending. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our VIP program manager, Jerry Bachicha, so she could give you a little bit more information. Thank you.
Oh, Jerry, you're still muted. I know Zoom world, how that, there you go.
Oh my gosh, who would think I would do this on a press conference? Okay, thank you, Chief Medina. My name's Jerry Bachicha, and I'm the program manager for the Violence Intervention Program for the City of Albuquerque. I come with a background of system reform work in the behavioral health world, specifically in the behavioral health world, incorporating folks who have lived experience into the work of the behavioral health service providers in the state of New Mexico, as well as 15 years of experience in the juvenile justice system and developing programs for diversions, alternatives to detention, and consistent quality improvement with the actual processes in the juvenile justice system. So this particular program, the Violence Intervention Program, spans several departments in the city, including APD, Family and Community Services, and we're working closely to align with the Albuquerque Community Safety Department. It takes a village, as they say, to make sure that we address the underlying causes of gun violence in Albuquerque. So the Violence Intervention Program was launched about a year ago to address gun violence in Albuquerque, and several components of the Violence Intervention Program have been piloted with great success. In the past year, the VIP program has implemented weekly shooting reviews, and that involves cross-agency law enforcement partners. And we also implemented custom notifications, which is an outreach component. We identify the folks that need outreach through those weekly shooting reviews. We also have, as the mayor has talked about, done a call-in several times for group members involved in gun crime in Albuquerque. The implementation began in late March of 2020, and that was just as our world was shutting down due to the pandemic. The VIP team had to find multiple innovative ways to overcome the challenges of the pandemic, because this is a really relationship-based one-to-one program. And it only works if we reach out in that way. So we thank the service providers that have worked alongside of us throughout the pandemic as we move forward to intervene in those cycles of gun violence. The Violence Intervention Program works with less than 0.01% of Albuquerque's population. So if you translate that to numbers, that's about 600 to 700 folks that we can serve within the population. These folks actually drive gun violence and violent crime in Albuquerque. So the program strives to reduce homicides and shootings first and foremost. We reduce the incarceration rates and victimization for the VIP participants. We detect and interrupt retaliation. And we also develop community-based alternatives to violence. So each component of VIP includes respectful in-person communication with high-risk individuals, relationship-based social services for those high-risk individuals, and that's high risk for victimization of gun violence or potentially for perpetration of gun violence. Also, components include the intervention in the cycle of harm involved in each criminal act, analysis of gun violence trends, and also narrowly focused law enforcement actions. And the name of that strategy is actually called focused deterrence. We have developed in the last year a service provider collective called VIP All In, and it supports the participants of the Violence Intervention Program. And Chief talked about the services that were offered, and they also include crime victim reparation services, relocation, and also a whole series of trauma recovery, which is a journey rather than just a service, and could take years. So roughly 97% of the individuals who have received the custom notifications, which is our person-to-person kind of intervention in the cycles of violence, have not been arrested since receiving VIP's message of nonviolence. And like Chief said, the 3% who have been arrested were predominantly arrested for drug-related offenses. So I'm really excited for this year. As the pandemic diminishes and the city reopens, VIP will be conducting a 9-month planning that will include multiple venues for community input and formal engagement with the VIP program and its development. The planning will serve to lay the foundation for building the community components of the program. These components will be designed and driven in partnership with the individuals and the families and the community most impacted in our city by gun violence. I would like to send this now over to Commander Langwood.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Luke Langwood. I'm a commander in APD's Investigative Bureau. And I was fortunate enough to be given the opportunity by Mayor Keller and CAO Nair and Chief Medina to work with the Violence Intervention Program when we brought it online, which had never been done before in APD. So it was an amazing opportunity. And I look back to the very first custom notification that I did, the first one that we did, myself and an agent from the Bernalillo County District Attorney's Office, to up to, I think I did 3 on Tuesday, and to get out there and actually meet with individuals who have been identified at the highest risk in our community for gun violence. So I look at the custom notifications, and like Jerry said, that's just one component of the violence intervention program. But I think it's important that we highlight the success that we've had in this one particular component. APD's responsibility for the custom notification is to provide that law enforcement message, basically educate on what the penalties and consequences are of gun violence, but then also to reinforce to that individual that they're part of community, that at the end of the day, we don't want to see them killed or hurt or take action to where they're incarcerated. So of course, we always reinforce that message after we explain to them the penalties that they'll face if they do pick up a gun and pull the trigger. So like the chief and Jerry said, we've done about 140 of these custom notifications, and they gave you a percentage. And I believe if it's correct, if the numbers are correct, we've had 1 individual that was a victim of further gun violence and 3 individuals that were arrested. They were arrested for other charges. They weren't arrested for pulling a trigger. So I think, comparing to other cities and nationwide, I think that's pretty successful, that the majority of the individuals that we contacted have not had to resort to violent crime. But I'd like to share with you one of these interventions that kind of sticks out in my mind, where an individual was shot. He did receive a gunshot wound. And when we went and talked with him, he told us that as soon as he recovered from his wounds, he knew who had shot him, and he was going to take action, and he was going to retaliate and shoot that individual. But it was because of the VIP team taking the time and explaining to him the messages and providing him with resources that he changed his mind, and he didn't take that action, which would have led to him being incarcerated. So it was a very positive interaction. That always stuck with me, how that's one homicide, one shooting that we prevented. I don't have an exact number on how many additional shootings we prevented, but knowing that we even prevented one more homicide, to me, it's meaningful, and it's showing that it's successful. Fast forward a year later now, from when we launched this and started the VIP program at APD, we're really focused now on looking at the success we've had with custom notifications and how we can expand that, how we can really increase the number of these interventions that we're doing. And then obviously for the individuals that do commit violent crime, our detectives and investigators are going to give 110%, and they are doing everything they can to hold those individuals accountable and ensuring that they're charged with the appropriate charges, and they're going to be held accountable. So again, by looking at how we can really increase our bandwidth or the amount that we can do of these interventions, we're working still with our public safety partners. We have more people in the VIP team that are really helping us identify the most at-risk people in our population, in our community, that can benefit from the VIP. Lastly, at APD, always trying to improve our efficiency and effectiveness. Towards the end of last year, we looked at the number that we had done for last year, and we made ourselves a goal about increasing at least 10% for this year of the number of these interventions. I can happily to report to all of you we're more than well on track to exceed that number. And as we innovate and come up with new ways to expand it even further, we'll be able to do more of these interventions. So at this time, I'd like to thank you for your time and turn it over to the social service coordinator, Angel Garcia. Thank you.
Thank you, Commander Langwood. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angel Garcia, and I'm the Social Services Coordinator for the Violence Intervention Program. And what I bring to this role is over 20 years of gangs and narcotics experience through the form of lived experience. So I am one of the persons that has been out, except for the first few custom notifications. I've been on every single custom notification ever since. And there isn't really anything that I could encounter with the people that we talk to that I haven't been through myself. So I'm talking to people who are literally in shoes that I've walked in before. And I've experienced gun violence. I've been a victim of gun violence. In my younger years, I've perpetrated violence. So I could understand where the people in our community are coming from, and I've felt the pain. I've felt it, so I know how to connect with them. I've been to prison, and I moved here to Albuquerque because I couldn't successfully change my life in Los Angeles, and mostly because I didn't know how. I didn't know where the exit was for me. So I moved here. I enrolled in college, and slowly those little achievements started changing me. And I was very fortunate and grateful that Mayor Keller had happened to be at an event where I was sharing my story, and he offered me an interview, and I got the job. So these interventions, like they've been talking about, are very customized. We listen to the people. We try to see what interests them, and there's been a couple where, like, the young person was interested in music. He wanted to be a rapper, so we took somebody out with us who has connections in the music industry, who is a published poet, uh, just to pique their interest and try to get them to engage with us more. We've had small successes, but the bigger ones that come to my mind is a young man who was facing some charges, but then he started working with me. He was very receptive to everything I suggested. I got him into counseling. I got him out in the community doing community service with me, feeding the homeless. And he has been employed for the last few months to the point where he's saving money now because he wants to buy a food truck. He found his passion in cooking, and he said that's an outlet for his stress now. So he's gonna buy a food truck. We'll highlight that once it's rolling on the streets. And also another individual who had been in 3 incidents in a year. We managed to get her help with one of our community service providers, Youth Development Incorporated, through the Strife program, strategies to reduce youth violence. And now she's in a program called the Albuquerque EMS Corps, which is a great program. They get stipends every month, personal mentorship from AFR, Albuquerque Fire Rescue, and they're carving out new futures for themselves. So these are the types of mentorships that we provide, personal guidance, whatever they tell me they need. I don't stop until I could get it for them or as close as possible as I can. I do my best to get them what they need. But also, I think the bigger thing is the connection and the comfort that they feel talking to me. So we engage, and they're meaningful conversations. I talk to them openly as well. They talk to me openly as well. Any questions they have of me, I answer, and then to my surprise, like they just started opening up to me, like some of their pains, things that they're going through, and so I always suggest therapy. And a lot of people are working through a lot of issues, and so 3% recidivism rate, we're having good success. And I'm even more hopeful now that things are beginning to open up, where we'll be able to use more tools that the VIP program has not been able to use thus far. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Teresa Gonzalez. I am a native Genisara, born and raised in New Mexico. I recently joined the VIP team, but I've been doing this work for over 2 decades and have personal experience, including family members and loved ones impacted by gun violence. Some of my professional body of work includes training community and justice system stakeholders on strategies to reduce racial and ethnic disparities, and also helping community organizations and leaders to build internal capacity, funding, and infrastructure to lead this work themselves. I've also co-built several community-based alternatives to detention and incarceration in New Mexico and also California, where I spent the last 5 years working in the Bay Area and the Central Valley. Also, I've had experience running transitional living facilities for formerly incarcerated women, being formerly incarcerated myself, and establishing several nationally recognized reentry initiatives for adjudicated youth and adults. Many organizations need help in expanding integrated models of mental behavioral health treatment, but through a culturally rooted healing and trauma-informed lens to advance programs and services for victims of violent crime. Oftentimes the offenders of violence are themselves victims, but we also focus on the victims and not just the folks that are perpetuating violence. We are hopeful about this time in our city's commitment to expand the next phase of our VIP model and scaling the components we know are working. Our pilot model has been informed by best practices nationally, and we are learning from their successes as well as their challenges. We have local and lived experience on our team, as you've heard, and understand the landscape of Albuquerque. A majority of our staff have been formerly incarcerated and have expertise working with very high-risk populations and understand the long arc and investment it requires to mitigate huge barriers due to structural racism and inequities. There are several gun violence models and strategies implemented nationally using localized approaches that speak to the unique needs of each community. There are currently over 30 jurisdictions across the nation through the Office of Violence Prevention Network, and we are receiving technical assistance from the National Institute for Criminal Justice Reform and also the Live Free campaign. Models in Oakland and other cities have resulted in over a 50% decrease of non-fatal shootings and homicides. However, we are seeing a new rise in violence, which has been exacerbated by the pandemic and the inability of individuals to obtain employment and critical services needed for their families due to the nationwide shutdown. Now that the city will open up, we will be in an intense time of recovery. We know that face-to-face, dignified, and respectful interventions with the communities hardest impacted is the best and really only way to increase our effectiveness while partnering with local service providers and community at large to ensure we are providing opportunities that are meaningful, strength-based, culturally responsive, and sustainable. Gun violence is a public health crisis, hence we are looking at the underlying drivers of violence as mentioned by my colleagues, also known as the social determinants of health. As Jerry mentioned in her statements, we are in the process of evaluating our first-year pilot and will be inviting community to be at the table in our strategic planning process. We will be launching this very soon. Since June of 2020, the VIP leadership team has met with individual stakeholders, including community-based service providers, nonprofit directors, public systems leaders, and community members to engage them through an analysis for community readiness from diverse representatives across the Southeast neighborhood. We also convened the network of VIP All In that Jerry spoke about, which is comprised of approximately 30 community-based organizations. We worked with VIP to identify new partners and missing stakeholders to support the social services coordinator with custom notifications and also just the provision of critical services for all participants that we work with. We have also met bi-monthly with a group of community advocates that are self-organized from the African-American community, which is hardest impact also by disparities and disproportionality as it relates to detention for young people as well as adults. And then we launched a successful 30-day King Nonviolence campaign with community partners and City of Albuquerque staff. And one of the things we're happy about is that we've most recently developed a partnership or working on a new partnership with the University of New Mexico hospital staff emergency services to build out our first hospital-based violence intervention program. In our efforts to implement public health and community-centered gun violence prevention strategies, we hope you will join us in scaling these life-saving interventions related to urban and communal violence, which impacts our entire community. If not directly, indirectly, everyone knows the harm it causes and the trauma that we all feel when we see these things occurring around us and to our, directly to our loved ones. And I just want to thank you all for your time with us today and look forward to continuing the conversation and inviting everyone to join us in this really transformative work.
Thank you, Teresa. And I'm just gonna, before we open it up to Q&A, I'm just gonna share my screen quickly, and we're gonna share a brief clip from a custom notification that Commander Langwood and Angel were on. So bear with me as I do this. Okay. All righty, can everyone see my screen? If any of the panelists can let me know.
It's like we care and we want you safe
I
because
appreciate
you
that.
are part of this community, our community. The second half of this program is the resources that we can provide you, and that's why I brought Angel Garcia. He's our social service coordinator, so I'll just let him.
Okay, so trust me, I know about PT. I used to be a gang member. I've been shot.
So you already know.
So
And I'm from Brooklyn, New York. So you already know. Thank you for
Yeah.
that, sir.
So my number's right here. My number's right here. That's my direct cell phone number.
Okay.
So the program has service. The city has services. You know, food boxes, rental assistance, utility assistance.
Oh, okay, great.
Whatever it might be, just give me a call.
Okay.
Education, job
Education,
help,
placement, and all that.
Yeah.
Oh, this is wonderful. Okay.
counseling. Because since
Yeah.
he did surf with us, there's a lot of good. There's so many resources,
This is wonderful.
but people just don't know that they're out there.
Because I go to the VA for everything, which because I'm 100% disabled veteran. I
Right.
can't work, but I'm 100. But still, it's nice to know that I can go somewhere other than the VA.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
thank you. This
Yeah.
is this is.
Okay, so that was just a brief clip, and due to privacy and safety of these individuals, that's why it was completely blurred like that. But if anyone has questions, I see someone raise their hand. We have Matt Risen. So Matt, go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, so I was curious. Commander Langwood said that one individual was a victim of gun violence. I was curious if he was talking about the person they had spoken to that said they were going to retaliate, or if he was saying that someone that had a custom notification then went on to later become a victim of gun violence and how badly they were injured.
Yes, sir. So no, the individual that I had talked about that had told us he was thinking about retaliation, that was not the individual that received an additional gunshot after we had went and talked to him. So the individual that had received an additional gunshot, it was more of a domestic violence issue, and that was the only individual out of the 140 people that we've talked to that was a further victim of gun violence. Thank you
And
for this.
he survived?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.